The dust swirled around her tattered skirts as she knelt on the boardwalk of Deeming, New Mexico territory, her pale, unseeing eyes fixed on nothing while her trembling fingers clutched an empty tin cup. Adelaide Emerson had not eaten in 3 days, and the September sun of 1887 beat down mercilessly on her uncovered head. Her once beautiful auburn hair now matted and dull from weeks of living on the streets. She could hear the boots of passers-by clicking against the wooden planks, feel the vibrations of their steps, but no one stopped. No one cared that a 22-year-old woman was slowly dying of starvation in broad daylight. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse and dehydration. "Anything at all. I have not eaten since Sunday." The footsteps continued past her, some quickening their pace as if poverty might be contagious. Adelaide had learned in the 6 months since losing her sight to scarlet fever that blindness made her invisible in a way she had never been when she could see. When she had been the daughter of a prosperous ranch owner, men had tipped their hats and women had invited her to tea. Now that her father was dead, the ranch sold to pay his debts, and her sight gone, she was nothing more than an obstacle to step around. She heard the jingle of spurs approaching, a sound that made her shrink back against the storefront wall. Cowboys were unpredictable, sometimes generous in their drunkenness, sometimes cruel. These boots stopped directly in front of her, and she held her breath. "Madam." The voice was deep, roughened by wind and sun, but there was something gentle in it that made her lift her face toward the sound. "You are truly hungry." "Yes, sir," Adelaide said, hating the desperation in her voice but too far gone to maintain pride. "I have nothing. No family, no home. I know I should not be begging, but I have nowhere else to turn." There was a long silence, and Adelaide wondered if he had walked away after all. Some people liked to toy with beggars to make them hope before crushing that hope underfoot. But then she heard the rustle of movement, felt the displacement of air as he crouched down beside her. "What is your name?" he asked. "Adelaide Emerson," she replied. "I was born in Silver City, but I came here with my father 2 years ago. He had a small ranch east of town." "Emerson," the cowboy repeated thoughtfully. "I heard about that place. Your father died last spring, did he not?" "Yes, sir." "The fever took him, and then it took my sight." Her voice cracked. "Everything was sold. I had nowhere to go. You have been on the streets since spring." The disbelief and anger in his voice startled her. "Not the whole time. I tried to find work, but no one will hire a blind woman. I stayed with a family for a while, doing what I could to earn my keep, but they fell on hard times themselves and could not keep me anymore. That was 3 weeks ago." The cowboy was quiet for a long moment, and Adelaide could feel his gaze on her face. She knew what he must be seeing: the gauntness of her cheeks, the dirt on her skin, the hopelessness that clung to her like the dust from the street. "My name is Kieran Garrett," he said finally. "I run a ranch about 10 miles north of here. It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but it is mine, and I do well enough." "That is very nice," Adelaide said politely, unsure why he was telling her this. "I am going to help you, Miss Emerson, but not in the way you might expect." She heard the clink of metal, felt him take her hand and press something cool and smooth into her palm. Her fingers closed around it automatically, exploring its shape. It was a ring, she realized with confusion, a simple band of what felt like gold. "I do not understand," she said, holding the ring back out toward where she thought he must be. "I asked for food, not charity of this kind. Please, I cannot accept jewelry from a stranger." "It is not charity," Kieran said, his voice firm, "and I am asking you to marry me." Adelaide nearly dropped the ring in shock. "You cannot be serious. You do not even know me." "I know enough." He took her other hand, his palm rough with calluses but warm and steady. I know that you have been dealt a cruel hand by fate. I know that you are trying to survive the only way you can. I know that no woman should be left to starve on the streets of a town that once welcomed her father. But marriage, Adelaide protested, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. That is forever. You cannot bind yourself to a blind beggar out of pity. It is not pity. Kieran's thumb brushed across her knuckles and she shivered at the contact. I will be honest with you, Miss Emerson. I am 28 years old and I have been alone on my ranch for 3 years since my parents passed. I need a wife, and you need a home and protection. We can help each other. I would be nothing but a burden, Adelaide said, tears pricking at her sightless eyes. I cannot cook or clean properly anymore. I cannot help with ranch work. What possible use could I be to you? You can learn, Kieran said simply. I will teach you. The house is small enough that you can learn your way around it. You are not stupid, Miss Emerson, just blind. There is a difference. Adelaide wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. This morning she had woken up under a bridge, certain she would die within days. Now a complete stranger was proposing marriage. It had to be some kind of fever dream, a hallucination brought on by starvation. Why would you do this? She asked. Truly, I need to understand. There must be a dozen women in this territory who would marry you, women who can see, who can be proper wives. Kieran was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. My mother went blind in the last year of her life. A sickness took her sight, just as it took yours. I watched my father care for her, and I saw that she was still the same woman, still capable of love and laughter and living a full life. Her blindness did not define her. I do not believe yours defines you either. The tears spilled over then, running hot tracks down Adelaide's dusty cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her as if she were still human, still worthy of respect and kindness. I am frightened, she admitted in a whisper. I know, Kieran said, but you are starving and homeless and winter is coming. I am offering you a choice, Miss Emerson. You can stay here and likely die before the first snow. Or you can take a chance on a stranger who promises to feed you, shelter you, and treat you with respect. I will not force you, and if you truly do not wish to marry me, I will at least buy you a meal and find you a safe place to stay for a few nights. But I think we could make a good life together if you are willing to try. Adelaide's fingers tightened around the ring. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was madness, that marrying a man she had known for all of 10 minutes was the height of foolishness. But the alternative was returning to the bridge, to the gnawing hunger and the cold nights, and the certain knowledge that she would not survive much longer. If I say yes, she said slowly, and if I cannot learn to be a proper wife, if I am too much of a burden, will you promise to tell me? I could not bear to be a weight around your neck for the rest of your life. I promise, Kieran said, and I ask the same of you. If I am cruel or unkind, if this life is unbearable, you will tell me. We will face whatever comes with honesty between us. Adelaide took a shaky breath and nodded. Then yes, Mr. Garrett, I will marry you. She felt him slip the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Later, she would learn it had belonged to his grandmother, a woman who had crossed the plains in a wagon train and built a life in an unforgiving land through sheer determination. For now, she only knew that the metal was warm from his pocket and felt like a promise against her skin. Can you stand? Kieran asked gently. I think so. Adelaide tried to rise, but her legs buckled beneath her, weakened by days without food. Strong arms caught her before she could fall, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. When did you last eat? Kieran demanded, and she could hear the anger in his voice, though she sensed it was not directed at her. Sunday morning, Adelaide admitted. A woman gave me half a biscuit. Kieran cursed under his breath, a word Adelaide pretended not to hear. "We are going to the hotel restaurant right now. Then we are going to see the preacher. Can you wait that long to eat, or should I find something faster?" "I can wait," Adelaide said, though her stomach cramped painfully at the mere mention of food. "But please put me down. People will talk." "Let them talk," Kieran said firmly. "You are going to be my wife within the hour. I will carry you if I choose." He strode down the boardwalk with Adelaide in his arms, and she buried her face against his shoulder, overwhelmed by the rapid turn her life had taken. He smelled of leather and sage and honest sweat, and his arms were solid and sure around her. For the first time in months, Adelaide felt something other than despair. It was too early to call it hope, perhaps, but it was at least the absence of hopelessness, and that was enough for now. The restaurant was mercifully close, and Kieran set her gently in a chair before taking the seat across from her. She heard him order what sounded like half the menu, and when the food arrived, he guided her hands to the utensils and described where everything was on her plate. "Steak at 12 o'clock, he said. "Potatoes at 3, green beans at 9. Your water glass is just above the knife on your right." Adelaide's hands shook as she cut into the steak, and the first bite nearly made her weep. It had been so long since she had tasted anything so rich, so satisfying. She forced herself to eat slowly, knowing that her shrunken stomach would rebel if she ate too fast, but it was one of the hardest things she had ever done. "Take your time," Kieran said, his voice gentle. "We have all afternoon if you need it." "Tell me about yourself," Adelaide said between bites, desperate to know more about the man she had agreed to marry. "You said your parents passed 3 years ago." "Yes. My father had a heart condition. He went peacefully in his sleep one night, and my mother followed 6 months later. I think she died of grief as much as the illness that took her sight." Kieran paused, and Adelaide heard the clink of his fork against his plate. "They came to New Mexico when I was just a boy, looking for a fresh start. My father was a Union soldier during the war, and he wanted to leave those memories behind. They built the ranch from nothing, and they loved it." "Do you love it?" Adelaide asked. "I do," Kieran said simply. "It is hard work, and there are days when everything seems to go wrong, but it is mine. I have 40 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and enough land to expand if I can manage it. I am not rich, Miss Emerson, but I am comfortable. You will not starve or go without the necessities. After these past months, having a roof over my head and food in my belly sounds like unimaginable luxury," Adelaide said quietly. "But I want you to know that I will try to be useful. I may be blind, but I am not helpless. My mother taught me to cook and sew before she passed when I was 15, and I still remember those skills. I just need time to adapt them to my new circumstances." "We will figure it out together," Kieran assured her. "I am not expecting perfection, Miss Emerson. I am expecting partnership." Adelaide found herself smiling for the first time in what felt like years. "If we are to be married, perhaps you should call me Adelaide." "Adelaide," Kieran repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his rough voice. "And you should call me Kieran." "Kieran," she said, testing it out. It felt strange to be so familiar with a man she had just met. But then again, they were about to be married. Normal courtship rules hardly applied. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Kieran paid the bill and offered Adelaide his arm. She took it gratefully, relieved not to have to navigate the unfamiliar space alone. He led her out into the street and down the boardwalk, describing the buildings they passed and warning her about steps and obstacles. "The church is just ahead," he said. "Reverend Morrison is a good man. He knew your father, I believe." Adelaide's heart clenched at the mention of her father. "Yes, they were friendly. I have not spoken to him since the funeral." "He will be glad to see you safe," Kieran said. The church was cool and dim, and Adelaide could smell the familiar scent of old wood and candle wax. She heard Kieran call out a greeting, and then an older man's voice responded with surprise and pleasure. "Kieran Garrett, I have not seen you in town for weeks. What brings you here today?" The voice came closer, and then there was a sharp intake of breath. "Good Lord, is that Adelaide Emerson?" "Hello, Reverend Morrison," Adelaide said softly. "My dear girl, we have all been so worried about you. After you left the Johnsons, no one knew where you had gone. I tried to find you, but it was as if you had vanished." The Reverend's voice was thick with concern and guilt. "Are you well? Where have you been staying?" "She has been on the streets," Kieran said bluntly before Adelaide could formulate a more palatable answer. "Begging for food because this town turned its back on her." "That is not entirely fair," Adelaide protested. "People have their own troubles. I cannot expect them to care for me out of charity." "You should not have to," Kieran said firmly, "but that is going to change. Reverend, we are here to be married." There was a stunned silence, and Adelaide could practically feel the Reverend's shock radiating through the space. "Married," Reverend Morrison repeated. "But Kieran, you two barely know each other. Adelaide, are you certain about this?" "You do not have to marry out of desperation." "I am certain," Adelaide said, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. In the hour she had known Kieran Garrett, he had shown her more kindness and respect than anyone else had in months. He had not treated her as a burden or an object of pity, but as a person capable of making her own choices. "Mr. Garrett has made me a fair offer, and I am accepting it freely." "Kieran," the Reverend pressed. "I need a wife, and Adelaide needs a home," Kieran said. "We are both adults, both in our right minds. I know it is unconventional, but I have thought this through." "Have you?" Reverend Morrison sounded skeptical. "Marriage is a sacred commitment, not a business arrangement." "I am aware of that," Kieran said, and there was a hint of steel in his voice. "I am not entering into this lightly, Reverend. I am making a promise before God to care for this woman for the rest of my life, and I intend to keep that promise. Now, will you marry us? Or do we need to find someone who will?" Adelaide heard the Reverend sigh deeply. "Very well. But I want your word, both of you, that you will work to make this marriage a true partnership, not just a convenience." "You have it," Kieran said. "Adelaide," the Reverend prompted. "I promise," Adelaide said. "I will do everything in my power to be a good wife." "Then let us begin," Reverend Morrison said, resignation and hope mingling in his voice. The ceremony was simple and quick, nothing like the elaborate wedding Adelaide had once dreamed of as a girl. There were no flowers, no guests, no white dress or celebration. Just two people standing before God and making vows that would bind them together until death. When Kieran slipped the gold band onto her finger for the second time that day, Adelaide felt the weight of what she had done settle over her like a blanket. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Morrison said. "Kieran, you may kiss your bride." Adelaide had not thought about this part, and her breath caught as she felt Kieran's hand cup her cheek. His lips brushed against hers, soft and brief, a gentle promise rather than a demand. It was her first kiss, and she felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and something else, something warm and fluttering that she could not quite name. "Thank you," Kieran murmured against her ear, so quietly that only she could hear. "For what?" Adelaide whispered back. "For trusting me." After the ceremony, Kieran insisted on stopping at the general store to buy Adelaide some necessities. She protested that it was too much, that she did not need anything fancy, but he was adamant that she have at least 2 proper dresses, a warm coat for the coming winter, and various other items. "You are my wife now," he said when she objected to the expense. "Let me provide for you. It is my responsibility and my pleasure." The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon by the time they left Deeming in Kieran's wagon. Adelaide sat beside him on the bench seat, her new belongings packed carefully in the back. She could feel the movement of the wagon, hear the creak of the wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves, smell the dust and sage that perfumed the desert air. "Tell me what you see," she said impulsively. Kieran was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to translate the visual world into words. "The sky is turning orange and pink in the west," he said finally. "The sun is about an hour from setting. The land around us is flat and brown, with patches of scrub brush and the occasional cactus. In the distance, you can see mountains, purple and hazy in the evening light. There is a hawk circling overhead, probably hunting for its dinner." "It sounds beautiful," Adelaide said wistfully. "It is," Kieran agreed. "Harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful in its own way. You will learn to appreciate it through your other senses. The way the air smells after a rain, the feel of the wind before a storm, the sound of the cattle lowing in the evening." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Adelaide found herself relaxing against the seat. For the first time in months, she felt safe. It was a strange feeling, this sense of security with a man she barely knew, but it was undeniable. "Are you frightened?" Kieran asked after a while. "A little," Adelaide admitted. "Everything is happening so fast. This morning I thought I was going to die, and now I am married and heading to a new home. It is overwhelming." "I understand," Kieran said. "But I want you to know that you can ask me anything, tell me anything. I know we are strangers, but we do not have to stay that way. I want us to be friends, Adelaide, as well as husband and wife." "I would like that," Adelaide said softly. The ranch came into view as the last light was fading from the sky. Kieran described it to her as they approached. A small wooden house with a covered porch, a barn and a few outbuildings, corrals for the horses and cattle. It was modest but well maintained, a testament to Kieran's hard work and dedication. He helped her down from the wagon and guided her up the porch steps. The front door creaked as he opened it, and Adelaide stepped into what was now her home. The air inside smelled of wood smoke and coffee, with an underlying mustiness that suggested a house without a woman's touch for too long. "Let me light some lamps," Kieran said, and Adelaide heard the scratch of a match, saw the faint glow of light against her darkness. "The main room is here, with the kitchen area in the back corner. There are 2 bedrooms, one on each side of the main room. You can have the larger one, the one my parents used." "Where will you sleep?" Adelaide asked. "The other room is fine," Kieran said. "I want you to be comfortable, Adelaide. I know we are married, but I do not expect anything from you that you are not ready to give. We can take this as slowly as you need." Adelaide felt a rush of gratitude and relief. She had been trying not to think about the more intimate aspects of marriage, and Kieran's consideration eased some of her anxiety. "Thank you," she said. "That is very kind." "It is only right," Kieran said. "Now, you must be exhausted. Let me show you your room, and you can rest while I put the horses away and bring in your things." He took her hand and led her carefully through the main room, describing the layout and furniture as they went. The bedroom was simple, furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. Kieran guided her around the space, letting her touch each piece of furniture so she could create a mental map. "There is water in the pitcher," he said. "Fresh linens on the bed. If you need anything at all, just call for me." "I will," Adelaide promised. After Kieran left, Adelaide sank down onto the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. The mattress was soft beneath her, softer than anything she had slept on in months. She ran her hands over the quilt, feeling the careful stitches, imagining the woman who had made it. Kieran's mother, perhaps, spending long evenings piecing together scraps of fabric into something beautiful and useful. Tears welled up in her sightless eyes, but for once, they were not tears of despair. She was overwhelmed, certainly, and frightened of what the future might hold, but she was also grateful beyond words. Kieran Garrett had saved her life today, not just by giving her food and shelter, but by giving her dignity and choice. He had not simply rescued her like some damsel in a story. He had offered her a partnership, a chance to rebuild her life with purpose and meaning. She heard him moving around in the main room, the thump of her packages being brought in, the clatter of dishes as he prepared something in the kitchen. Adelaide stood and carefully made her way to the door, using the furniture as guideposts. She found the door frame and followed it out into the main room. "Kieran," she called softly. "I am in the kitchen," he replied. "Are you hungry? I am making some coffee and heating up some stew." Adelaide navigated toward his voice, moving slowly and carefully. She bumped into a chair and winced, but kept going until she felt the change in the floor that indicated the kitchen area. "You should rest," Kieran said, concern evident in his voice. "I wanted to help," Adelaide said. "I know I cannot do much yet, but I would like to try. Could you show me where things are so I can begin to learn?" She heard Kieran set something down, and then his footsteps approached. His hand touched her shoulder gently. "All right," he said, "but we will take it slow. Your first day here should not be about work." For the next hour, Kieran patiently walked Adelaide through the kitchen, describing where he kept the dishes, the food supplies, the cooking utensils. He let her touch everything, exploring with her sensitive fingers, building a picture in her mind. Adelaide was surprised by how much she could discern through touch and sound. She could tell the difference between the tin plates and the ceramic mugs, could gauge the weight of a pot and estimate how much it held, could smell the different spices and identify most of them. "You are a quick learner," Kieran observed with what sounded like approval. "I am motivated," Adelaide said with a small smile. "I want to be useful, not a burden." "You are not a burden," Kieran said firmly, "but I appreciate your willingness to learn." They ate together at the small kitchen table, and Kieran continued to describe the placement of items on Adelaide's plate. The stew was simple but hearty, rich with meat and vegetables, and Adelaide savored every bite. It was her second full meal in one day, a luxury she had not experienced in months. "Tell me about your family," Kieran said as they ate. "I know your father had a ranch, but what about your mother, siblings?" "I was an only child," Adelaide said. "My mother died when I was 15, a riding accident. It was just my father and me after that. He taught me everything he knew about ranching, probably more than was proper for a daughter. I could rope and brand and ride as well as any of his hands. Can you still ride?" Kieran asked with interest. Adelaide laughed bitterly. "I have not been on a horse since I lost my sight. I assumed it would be impossible." "It does not have to be," Kieran said thoughtfully. "With the right horse and some practice, I think you could learn. Not right away, of course, but eventually." The idea sent a thrill through Adelaide. She had loved riding, had missed it desperately in the months since her world went dark. To think that she might be able to experience that freedom again seemed almost too wonderful to believe. "I would like that," she said quietly. After dinner, Kieran showed Adelaide the rest of the house, guiding her through the layout until she felt comfortable navigating between the main room and her bedroom. He was endlessly patient, never rushing her or making her feel foolish when she misjudged a distance or bumped into furniture. "It will take time," he assured her, "but you will learn. The house is not that large, and once you have the layout memorized, you will be able to move around freely." As the evening wore on, Adelaide found herself fighting exhaustion. The day had been emotionally and physically draining, and her body was still recovering from weeks of malnutrition. "You should sleep," Kieran said, noticing her fatigue. "We can continue your orientation tomorrow." Adelaide nodded, suddenly too tired to argue. Kieran walked her to her bedroom door and bid her good night, his voice warm and gentle. "Thank you," Adelaide said, "for everything. I know I have said it before, but I cannot say it enough. You saved my life today, Kieran." "You saved mine too," Kieran said softly. "You just do not know it yet." Before Adelaide could ask what he meant, she heard his footsteps retreating across the main room. She stood in the doorway for a moment, puzzled by his words, then shook her head and entered her bedroom. She found the nightgown Kieran had bought her earlier, still crisp and new, and changed out of her dirty dress. The bed welcomed her like an old friend, and she sank into it with a sigh of relief. As she drifted off to sleep, Adelaide thought about the strange turn her life had taken. She was married to a man she had known for less than a day, living in a house she could not see, facing a future that was uncertain at best. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It was fragile and new, this feeling, but it was definitely hope. The days that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Kieran woke early each morning to tend to the ranch work, but he always made sure Adelaide had breakfast before he left. He would describe what he was making, guide her hands to the plates and utensils, and sit with her while they ate together. Adelaide treasured these quiet morning moments, learning about Kieran through their conversations. He told her about growing up in Missouri before the war, about the difficult journey west with his parents, about the challenges and rewards of building a ranch from nothing. He spoke of his dreams for the future, his hope to expand the herd and maybe hire a few hands to help with the work. He talked about the land with a passion that Adelaide found infectious, describing the changing seasons and the wildlife and the particular beauty of the New Mexico Territory sky. In turn, Adelaide shared her own stories. She told him about her childhood in Silver City, about learning to ride from her father, about her mother's love of music, and how the house had always been filled with song. She spoke of the fear and confusion when the fever had taken her sight, the desperate months that followed her father's death, the slow erosion of hope as she realized that the world had no place for a blind woman alone. "I am glad you found me," she said one morning over coffee. "I am glad you said yes," Kieran replied. Adelaide spent her days learning the house, memorizing every corner and surface until she could move through it with increasing confidence. Kieran had rearranged some of the furniture to make pathways clearer, and he always made sure to put things back in their designated spots so Adelaide would not be confused. She practiced in the kitchen, learning to cook by touch and smell and sound. Her first attempts were clumsy, and she burned herself more than once, but Kieran never complained. He ate her slightly scorched biscuits and over-salted stew with apparent enjoyment, always finding something to praise. "You are getting better every day," he would say, and Adelaide would flush with pleasure at the genuine warmth in his voice. She also began to venture outside, at first just onto the porch, then gradually into the yard. Kieran had strung a rope from the house to the barn as a guide, and Adelaide would follow it with her hand, learning the distance and the feel of the ground beneath her feet. He introduced her to the animals, bringing her to the barn to meet his favorite horse, a gentle mare named Willow. "She is the sweetest tempered horse I have ever owned," Kieran said, guiding Adelaide's hand to the mare's soft nose. "I think she would be perfect for you to learn to ride again, when you are ready." Adelaide stroked Willow's velvety muzzle, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and hay. "She feels lovely." "She is," Kieran agreed, "and patient. She will take care of you." Weeks passed, and Adelaide found herself settling into her new life with surprising ease. The constant fear and desperation that had haunted her for months began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of security and purpose. She was learning to be useful again, to contribute to the household in meaningful ways. She could prepare simple meals, do mending by touch, even help with some of the lighter chores around the house. More importantly, she was learning about Kieran. He was a man of quiet strength and deep kindness, she discovered. He never raised his voice in anger, never showed impatience with her struggles, never made her feel like a burden despite the extra work her blindness created. He treated her with a respect and consideration that made her heart ache, because it was so different from the pity and dismissal she had received from others. She began to notice little things about him. The way he hummed while he worked, always the same 3 or 4 tunes. The particular cadence of his footsteps, heavy on the heel, that let her know he was approaching even when he did not speak. The smell of the soap he used, sharp and clean. The warmth of his hands when he guided her through a new task, calloused but gentle. One evening about a month after their wedding, Adelaide was sitting on the porch enjoying the cool air when Kieran came to join her. She heard him settle into the chair beside hers with a satisfied sigh. "Long day?" she asked. "They are all long," Kieran said, but there was contentment rather than complaint in his voice. "But good. The herd is healthy, and I think we will have a successful year." "I am glad," Adelaide said sincerely. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch. Adelaide had learned to identify the different animal calls, the rustle of the wind through the scrub brush, the distant yip of coyotes. "Adelaide," Kieran said after a while, his voice hesitant in a way that was unusual for him. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Of course," Adelaide said, turning toward his voice with concern. "What is it? Are you happy here?" The question was simple, but Adelaide could hear the vulnerability beneath it. "I know this is not the life you would have chosen, and I know you did not marry me for love. But are you at least content, or do you regret your decision?" Adelaide was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "I will not lie and say this is the life I dreamed of as a girl," she said slowly. "I never imagined I would be blind, or that I would marry a stranger out of desperation. But Kieran, you have given me back my life. You have given me purpose and dignity and a home. Every day I wake up grateful that you stopped on that boardwalk. So no, I do not regret my decision, not even a little." She heard Kieran let out a breath, as if he had been holding it waiting for her answer. "I am glad," he said quietly. "Because I do not regret it either. I know it probably sounds strange, but having you here, having someone to share this life with, it has made everything better. The house feels like a home now instead of just a place to sleep. I look forward to mealtimes instead of dreading the loneliness. You have brought light into my life, Adelaide, even if you cannot see it yourself." Adelaide felt tears prick at her eyes. "That is one of the kindest things anyone has ever said to me." "It is the truth," Kieran said. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "I want you to know that I am committed to this marriage, Adelaide. I am committed to you. I know we started as strangers, but I hope that we are becoming friends." "We are," Adelaide assured him, squeezing his hand. "And I am committed too, Kieran. I promise you that." That night, lying in her bed, Adelaide found herself thinking about Kieran's words. She realized with a start that somewhere along the way her feelings for him had begun to shift. What had started as gratitude and relief was deepening into something more. She looked forward to their morning conversations, felt a little thrill when she heard his footsteps approaching, found herself wanting to please him not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Was it possible that she was falling in love with her husband? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had never been in love before, had barely even been courted before her father's death and her illness. She did not know if what she was feeling was love or just the natural affection that came from living in close quarters with a kind person. And even if it was love, did Kieran feel the same way? He had said he was committed to their marriage, but commitment and love were not the same thing. Adelaide decided to keep her growing feelings to herself for now. She did not want to make Kieran uncomfortable or pressure him into reciprocating emotions he might not feel. Their friendship was too precious to risk by pushing for more too soon. But as the weeks turned into months, it became harder to hide what she was feeling, especially when Kieran made it so easy to love him. Like the day he spent hours teaching her to ride Willow, his patience endless as Adelaide fought through her fear and relearned the skills she had once taken for granted. He walked beside the horse, one hand on the bridle, his voice calm and encouraging as Adelaide found her seat and her balance. When she finally managed to ride a full circuit of the corral without his help, his whoop of joy and pride made her heart soar. Or the evening when he found her crying in the kitchen after she had dropped and broken his mother's favorite serving bowl. Instead of anger, he had simply wrapped her in his arms and held her while she sobbed out her frustration and apologies. "It is just a bowl," he had murmured into her hair. "You are worth more than 100 bowls." Or the morning, he woke her before dawn and led her outside to experience the first snow of winter. He had placed her hand in his and described the way the flakes fell from the sky. Let her feel them landing cold and soft on her upturned face, walked with her through the transformed landscape as he painted it in words. These moments accumulated like snowflakes themselves, building into something substantial and real. Adelaide fell in love with Kieran Garrett slowly, and then all at once, and by the time winter settled in earnest over the New Mexico territory, she was completely, helplessly in love with her husband. She thought he might feel the same way. There were signs. The way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the excuses he found to touch her hand or shoulder, the way he seemed to light up when she entered a room. But he never said anything explicit, never pushed their relationship beyond the bounds of friendship and partnership. Adelaide wondered if he was waiting for her to make the first move, to indicate that she was ready for their marriage to be a true marriage in every sense. But she was terrified of rejection, of misreading the signs and making a fool of herself. It was Christmas Eve when everything changed. Kieran had ridden into Deeming earlier in the week to stock up on supplies and had returned with mysterious packages that he would not let Adelaide touch. On Christmas morning, he woke her early with coffee and fresh biscuits. "Merry Christmas," he said, pressing a warm mug into her hands. "Merry Christmas," Adelaide replied, smiling. "You did not have to get me anything, Kieran. You have already given me so much." "I wanted to," Kieran said. "Now drink your coffee and get dressed. I have something to show you." Intrigued, Adelaide did as he asked. When she emerged from her bedroom, Kieran took her hand and led her outside. The morning was cold, and Adelaide pulled her coat tighter around herself as they walked across the yard. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You will see," Kieran said, the smile evident in his voice. He stopped her in front of what she guessed was the barn based on the familiar smells and sounds. Then he placed her hands on something smooth and curved. "What is this?" Adelaide asked, running her fingers over the object. It felt like leather, tooled and shaped into something specific. "It is a saddle," Kieran said. "I had it made special for you. The stirrups are adjusted for your height and the seat is designed to give you extra stability. I thought maybe when the weather warms up you might like to really ride again, not just in the corral but out on the range with me." Adelaide felt tears spring to her eyes. "Kieran, this is too much." "It is not enough," Kieran said softly. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something. I know we married for practical reasons, And I know you might not feel the same way I do, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I am in love with you." Adelaide's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "I love you," Kieran repeated, his voice shaking slightly. "I think I started falling for you that first day, when you were so brave and honest sitting on that boardwalk. And every day since has only made me love you more. You are strong and kind and determined, and you make me want to be a better man. I understand if you do not feel the same way. Our marriage can continue as it has been, and I will never pressure you for more than you want to give. But I needed you to know that for me, this is not just a practical arrangement anymore. I love you, Adelaide Garrett." Adelaide was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she fumbled for Kieran's hands. "You love me, truly, truly," Kieran confirmed, squeezing her hands. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "Oh, Kieran," Adelaide sobbed, "I love you too. I have been so frightened to tell you, so afraid that you would think I was just confused or grateful. But it is not gratitude or confusion. I love you. I love your kindness and your patience and the way you make me feel like I matter. I love the sound of your voice and the way you describe the world to me, and the way you never make me feel less than whole. I love you so much it terrifies me." She heard Kieran make a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then his arms were around her, pulling her close. Adelaide wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, feeling his heart pounding against hers. "I was so afraid," Kieran murmured into her hair. "Afraid that you would never see me as anything more than the man who saved you from the street. Afraid that I would spend the rest of my life married to a woman who could never love me back." "I see you," Adelaide said fiercely. "Maybe not with my eyes, but I see you, Kieran. I see your good heart and your gentle soul and everything you do to make me happy. And I love all of it. I love all of you." Kieran pulled back slightly and Adelaide felt his hand cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, really kiss you?" "Yes," Adelaide breathed. This kiss was nothing like the brief, chaste peck at their wedding. This was deep and passionate, full of months of restrained longing finally released. Adelaide melted into it, her fingers tangling in Kieran's hair, her body pressed against his. She had never been kissed like this, had never felt this overwhelming rush of desire and love and belonging all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Come inside," Kieran said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let me love you properly, Adelaide. Let me show you how I feel." Adelaide nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Kieran took her hand and led her back to the house, and for the first time he brought her not to her solitary bedroom but to his own. What followed was tender and sweet, Kieran taking his time to make sure Adelaide was comfortable and cared for. He was gentle with her inexperience, patient with her nervousness, and by the time the winter sun had fully risen, Adelaide understood in a whole new way what it meant to be loved. Afterward, lying in Kieran's arms with her head on his chest, Adelaide felt a completeness she had never experienced before. This was what marriage was supposed to be, she realized. Not just partnership and practical arrangement, but deep connection and intimacy and love. "Are you all right?" Kieran asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am perfect," Adelaide said and meant it. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." "Good," Kieran said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life making you even happier." Adelaide tilted her face up for another kiss and Kieran obliged, slow and sweet. "I still cannot believe this is real," Adelaide murmured. 6 months ago I was starving on a street corner, certain I would die. Now I am married to the man I love, lying in his arms on Christmas morning. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, then we are both having it," Kieran said, "and I never want to wake up. They stayed in bed longer than either of them usually would, talking and kissing and simply enjoying each other's presence. Eventually, hunger drove them to the kitchen, where they made breakfast together, bumping into each other in the small space and laughing like children. Adelaide felt different, she realized. Lighter, freer, more fully herself than she had been since losing her sight. Love had done that, Kieran's love and her own love for him. It had given her back a piece of herself she thought was lost forever. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Adelaide and Kieran grew closer every day, their love deepening as they built a life together. They talked about everything and nothing, shared their hopes and fears and dreams. Adelaide continued to learn and adapt, gaining confidence in her ability to manage the household and contribute to the ranch. When spring came, Kieran made good on his promise to teach Adelaide to ride beyond the confines of the corral. He started slowly, leading Willow with Adelaide in her new saddle, describing the landscape as they went. Gradually, as Adelaide's confidence grew, he let her ride on her own with him nearby on his own horse, ready to help if needed but trusting her to manage. The first time they rode out to the far pasture together, Adelaide felt a freedom she had not experienced since losing her sight. The wind in her face, the powerful movement of the horse beneath her, the vast open sky above that Kieran described in loving detail, all of it combined to make her feel alive and capable and whole. "I love this," she called out to Kieran, unable to contain her joy. "I love you," Kieran called back, and Adelaide could hear the smile in his voice. In early summer, Adelaide realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Kieran. When she finally shared the news over breakfast one morning, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Adelaide confirmed, smiling at the joy in his voice. "Probably in late January or early February, the way I figure it." Kieran let out a whoop of delight and swept Adelaide into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "We are going to be parents. Adelaide, this is the best news I have ever received. You are happy then?" Adelaide asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy. I am ecstatic." Kieran set her down but kept his arms around her. "A little terrified too, if I am being honest. I do not know the first thing about being a father." "And I do not know the first thing about being a mother," Adelaide said. "But we will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." "Together," Kieran agreed, kissing her soundly. The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide's blindness made some aspects of it more challenging, and she struggled with the nausea and fatigue that plagued her first few months. But Kieran was endlessly supportive, taking on extra household tasks without complaint and making sure Adelaide rested as much as possible. As her belly swelled with their growing child, Adelaide found herself both excited and anxious about the future. How would she care for a baby when she could not see it? What if she failed as a mother, unable to protect her child because of her blindness? Kieran, as always, seemed to understand her fears without her having to voice them. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her rounded stomach. "You are the strongest, most capable woman I know. Your blindness does not change that." "But what if I miss something important?" Adelaide asked. "What if the baby needs something and I cannot see the signs?" "Then we will learn together," Kieran said firmly. "You will find ways to adapt, just like you have with everything else, and I will be here to help every step of the way." "We are partners, Adelaide. We will do this together." His confidence bolstered her own, and Adelaide tried to focus on the excitement rather than the fear. She spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival, sewing tiny clothes by touch, helping Kieran convert a corner of their bedroom into a nursery area. Reverend Morrison's wife visited several times, bringing gifts and advice and becoming a friend to Adelaide in the process. "The whole town is talking about you too," Mrs. Morrison said one afternoon over tea. "About how happy you both seem, how well you are managing. Some people doubted Kieran's decision to marry you, I will not lie, but you have proven all the skeptics wrong." "We have been blessed," Adelaide said simply. "I know our marriage started unconventionally, but I cannot imagine loving anyone more than I love Kieran." "It shows," Mrs. Morrison said warmly. "You are both glowing with happiness. It does my heart good to see." The baby arrived on a cold night in February, 3 weeks earlier than Adelaide had expected. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Adelaide was certain she could not go on. But Kieran stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her, and when their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Adelaide wept with relief and joy. "It is a boy," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. "A perfect, healthy boy." The doctor placed the baby in Adelaide's arms, and she felt the solid weight of him, heard his cries gradually settling into whimpers as he felt the warmth of her body. She ran her fingers gently over his tiny features, mapping his face in her mind. The soft skin, the button nose, the wispy hair. "He is beautiful," Kieran said, and Adelaide heard tears in his voice. "Tell me," Adelaide pleaded. "Describe him to me." "He has dark hair like yours," Kieran said, "and your nose and mouth, but I think he has my eyes, blue-gray. His fingers are so tiny, Adelaide, and perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, everything exactly as it should be." Adelaide smiled through her tears. "What should we call him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding their son for the first time, Kieran said quietly, "I would like to name him after my father if that is all right with you. Kenneth Garrett." "Kenneth," Adelaide repeated softly. "I love it. Hello, Kenneth. We are your parents and we love you so much already." Little Kenneth proved to be a good baby, healthy and relatively calm. Adelaide learned to care for him through touch and sound, becoming attuned to his different cries and needs. She could tell when he was hungry versus tired versus in need of a diaper change, could soothe him with her voice and touch even when she could not see his face. Kieran was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son. Adelaide would hear him talking to Kenneth as he did chores, describing everything he was doing, singing the same songs his own father had sung to him. The love in his voice made Adelaide fall even more deeply in love with her husband. One evening when Kenneth was about 3 months old, Adelaide was rocking him to sleep while Kieran sat nearby, working on mending some tack. The domestic peace of the moment made Adelaide's heart swell. "Kieran," she said softly, not wanting to wake the baby who was finally drifting off. "Yes, love," Kieran replied. "I have been thinking about that day we met, about how desperate and hopeless I felt, how certain I was that I had no future worth living. And then you appeared and gave me everything. A home, a purpose, love, and now this beautiful child. I know I have thanked you before, but I do not think I have ever properly expressed how much that day meant to me." She heard Kieran set down his work and cross to where she sat. His hand touched her hair gently. "You gave me just as much, Adelaide," he said quietly. "I was so lonely before you came. I had the ranch and the work, but I had no one to share it with, no one to build a future with. I was just existing, not really living. You changed all of that. You brought love and laughter and purpose to my life. So if there is any thanking to be done, it should be mutual." Adelaide reached up and caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. "We saved each other then." "We did," Kieran agreed, "and I am grateful for it every single day." Kenneth stirred in Adelaide's arms, making a small sound of protest at the movement, and both parents laughed softly. Adelaide stood carefully and carried him to the cradle Kieran had built, settling him in with practiced ease. When she turned back, Kieran was there to pull her into his arms. "Come to bed," he murmured. "We should sleep while we can." "In a moment," Adelaide said. "I just want to stand here with you for a bit, to appreciate this life we have built." They stood together in the quiet house, holding each other, listening to their son's soft breathing. Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the depths of despair to this moment of perfect contentment. It had not been easy, and there were still challenges to face, but she would not change a single moment of it. "I love you," she whispered to Kieran. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Forever." The years that followed were full and rich. Kenneth grew into a bright, energetic boy who learned early to help his mother by describing things to her and keeping her oriented. He never knew a time when his mother could see, so her blindness was simply a normal part of his life, not something to pity or be ashamed of. When Kenneth was 3, Adelaide gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Clara. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth even more so, but both babies were healthy and strong. Kieran joked that the house had suddenly become very loud, but Adelaide could hear the joy in his voice. He loved being a father, loved his growing family with a fierce devotion that made Adelaide love him even more. The twins were more challenging than Kenneth had been, their cries often indistinguishable to Adelaide's ears, their needs sometimes conflicting. But she learned, adapting once again, finding ways to manage. Kieran hired a woman from town to come help a few days a week, giving Adelaide some relief and ensuring that the household ran smoothly. Kenneth appointed himself his sister's protector, watching over them with a seriousness that was both amusing and touching in one so young. He would report to Adelaide on their activities, describing what they were doing with the detailed attention she needed to keep track of 2 mobile toddlers. "Mama, Emma is trying to eat dirt again," he would announce solemnly. Or, "Clara climbed onto the chair and now she cannot get down." Adelaide learned to trust her son's observations, and Kenneth grew in confidence and responsibility. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Kieran had been carefully expanding the operation, and by the time Kenneth was 8, the Garrett Ranch was one of the most successful in the area. They had hired 2 permanent hands to help with the work, and Kieran was talking about buying adjacent land to increase their grazing area. "We are doing well," he told Adelaide one evening. "Better than I ever dreamed possible, and it is all because of you, because of the family we have built together." "It is because of your hard work," Adelaide protested. "It is because I had something to work for," Kieran insisted. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. Now I have a reason to build something lasting, something to pass on to our children." Adelaide smiled and leaned into his embrace. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset that she could not see but that Kieran described to her in loving detail. It was their ritual, these quiet evening moments when the children were in bed and they could simply be together. "You ever miss it?" Kieran asked suddenly. "Seeing, I mean. Do you ever wish things had been different?" Adelaide considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wish I could see our children's faces, watch them grow and change. I wish I could see you, see the man I love with my own eyes instead of through touch and description. But Kieran, I have learned that there are different ways of seeing. I may not have physical sight, but I see you through your actions, through the way you care for me and our children. I see the beauty of this land through the pictures you paint with words. I see our children's personalities through their voices and the way they move. It is different, yes, but it is not less. And I would not trade this life, our life, for anything." "You are remarkable," Kieran said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I hope you know that." "I am loved," Adelaide corrected. "That is what makes me remarkable. Your love has given me strength and confidence I never knew I possessed." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Kieran said, "I have been thinking about the future, about what will happen to the ranch when I am gone." "Kieran, you are only 38, Adelaide protested. "Why are you thinking about such morbid things?" "Because I want to make sure you and the children are taken care of," Kieran said. "I have been working with a lawyer and deeming to draw up papers that will ensure the ranch passes to you if anything happens to me. You will be protected, Adelaide. I promise you that." Adelaide felt tears sting her eyes. Even after all these years, Kieran was still thinking of her welfare, still making sure she would never be vulnerable or alone again. "Nothing is going to happen to you," she said fiercely. "You are going to live to be an old man, and we are going to grow old together, watching our grandchildren play in this same yard." "I certainly hope so," Kieran said with a laugh, "but it never hurts to be prepared." Kieran's foresight proved unnecessary as he remained healthy and strong year after year. The children grew and flourished under their parents' love and care. Kenneth developed a passion for ranching, following his father everywhere and learning the business inside and out. The twins, while close as only twins can be, developed very different personalities. Emma was quiet and thoughtful, with a love for music that reminded Adelaide of her own mother. Clara was boisterous and fearless, always getting into mischief and keeping Adelaide on her toes. When Adelaide was 35, she gave birth to their fourth child, another son they named James. By then, Kenneth was 13 and more than capable of helping care for his younger siblings. The twins, at 10, treated their new baby brother like a living doll, always wanting to hold him and help with his care. "Our family is complete now," Adelaide said to Kieran one night as they watched James sleep in his cradle. "It is perfect," Kieran agreed, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Four healthy, happy children and the love of my life by my side. What more could a man want?" Adelaide turned in his arms and kissed him, still feeling that flutter of joy and desire even after years of marriage. "I love you, Kieran Garrett." "I love you too, Adelaide Garrett," he replied. "More today than yesterday, and less than tomorrow." It was a phrase he had started saying early in their marriage, and it never failed to make Adelaide smile. As the children grew into adolescence and then young adulthood, Adelaide and Kieran faced new challenges. Kenneth's courtship of a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread. The twins' different paths as Emma pursued teaching, and Clara surprised everyone by deciding to train as a nurse. James's struggle to find his place as the youngest child. Through it all, Adelaide and Kieran presented a united front, supporting their children while giving them room to make their own choices and mistakes. "We have done well," Kieran said one evening when they were alone. Kenneth had recently married and moved to his own small house on the ranch property, while the twins were both away pursuing their respective careers. Only James, now 15, remained at home, and he was out with friends for the evening. "We have," Adelaide agreed. "I am proud of the people our children have become." "They learned from the best," Kieran said. "You have been an amazing mother, Adelaide. I know it was not always easy, but you never let your blindness stop you from being there for them." "They never made me feel limited," Adelaide said. "They just accepted that I did things differently and adapted. We adapted together." Kieran took her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band that had never left her finger since the day he first placed it there. "Do you remember that day in Deeming, when I gave you this ring?" "Every detail," Adelaide said softly. "I was so scared and so desperate, I could not imagine what you saw in me that made you want to help." I saw a woman who deserved better than what life had given her, Kieran said. I saw strength and dignity even in the depths of despair. I saw the woman I wanted to spend my life with, even if I did not realize it fully at the time. I thought you were crazy, Adelaide admitted with a laugh. Proposing to a blind beggar. Who does that? A man who knows an opportunity when he sees one, Kieran said. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, Adelaide. These past 20 years have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Adelaide said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Even with all the challenges, even with the moments of struggle, I would not change a single thing. This life we have built together is more than I ever dreamed possible. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had sustained them through 2 decades of joy and hardship. Adelaide thought about that desperate girl on the boardwalk, certain her life was over, unable to imagine a future worth living. She wished she could tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the cowboy with the kind voice and the gold ring was going to give her a life beyond her wildest dreams. But then again, maybe she would not change anything. Maybe that desperation, that fear, was necessary to appreciate the joy that followed. Maybe you had to know darkness to truly value the light. What are you thinking about? Kieran asked, sensing the direction of her thoughts as he so often did. How grateful I am, Adelaide said simply. For you, for our children, for this life. I am so grateful, Kieran. So am I, Kieran said, kissing the top of her head. So am I. The years continued to pass, bringing the natural cycle of life and death, joy and sorrow. They celebrated Kenneth's first child, a boy named after Kieran, and then 3 more grandchildren in quick succession as Kenneth and his wife built their own family. Emma married a fellow teacher and moved to Santa Fe, while Clara found love with a doctor she worked with and settled in Albuquerque. James, the baby of the family, surprised everyone by showing a talent for business and taking over much of the ranch's financial management, allowing Kieran to focus more on the aspects of ranching he truly loved. Adelaide's hair turned gray, and Kieran's once dark hair became shot through with silver. They moved a little slower, tired a little more easily, but their love remained constant and strong. They still sat together on the porch most evenings, still held hands and talked about everything and nothing, still looked forward to the quiet moments when it was just the two of them. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors from all over the territory came to celebrate, and Adelaide was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and respect. Person after person told her how much they admired her strength, how she had changed people's perceptions about what blind people could achieve. "You are an inspiration," Mrs. Morrison said, now elderly herself but still sharp as ever. "When you first came to this territory, you were a frightened girl with no hope. Look at you now. A successful rancher's wife, a mother and grandmother, a pillar of this community. You should be very proud of what you have accomplished." "I had help," Adelaide said, reaching for Kieran's hand. "I could not have done any of it without Kieran." "We helped each other," Kieran corrected, squeezing her hand. "That is what marriage is about." That night, after all the guests had left and the children had gone to their own homes, Adelaide and Kieran sat together in their bedroom. Adelaide was tired but happy, content with the way the day had gone. 25 years, she marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. "I know what you mean," Kieran said. "Sometimes I still see you as that young woman on the boardwalk, and I have to remind myself that we have built a whole life together since then." "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked. "Taking a chance on me?" "Never," Kieran said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You have made my life richer and fuller than I ever imagined possible. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Adelaide smiled at the familiar phrase, feeling the same rush of love and gratitude she had felt countless times over the years. "I love you too, Kieran. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself, for believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for saying yes," Kieran replied, "for trusting me enough to take a leap of faith, for building this family and this life with me, for being my partner in every sense of the word." They held each other close, two people who had started as strangers and become so much more. Adelaide thought about all the years stretching behind them, full of memories and love and shared experiences. And she thought about the years still ahead, however many they might have, and knew that whatever came, they would face it together. The years continued to unfold, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Adelaide and Kieran grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts still sharp and engaged. They remained active in the ranch management well into their 60s, only gradually handing over more responsibility to Kenneth and James. When Kieran was 70 and Adelaide 67, they finally decided it was time to step back completely. Kenneth had been running the day-to-day operations for years anyway, and it was time to let the younger generation take full control. "What will we do with all our free time?" Adelaide joked as they sat on their porch, now relocated to a smaller house Kenneth had built for them closer to the main ranch house. "I have a few ideas," Kieran said, and Adelaide could hear the smile in his voice. "We could take that trip to California you have always wanted. Visit Emma and Clara more often. Spoil our great-grandchildren even more than we already do." "That sounds perfect," Adelaide said contentedly. They did make the trip to California, a long journey by train that would have been unthinkable when they first married. Adelaide loved the adventure of it, the new sounds and smells and experiences. Kieran described the ocean to her, the vast expanse of water stretching to the horizon, the waves crashing against the shore. He led her down to the beach and let her feel the sand beneath her feet, the cold water washing over her toes. "It is magnificent," Adelaide breathed, the salt air filling her lungs. "Not as magnificent as you," Kieran said, pulling her close. They returned to New Mexico renewed and refreshed, ready to enjoy their remaining years surrounded by family and the land they loved. Adelaide's health remained good, though she tired more easily than she once had. Kieran developed some arthritis that made his joints ache on cold mornings, but he remained active and engaged. On a warm spring evening when Adelaide was 72, she and Kieran sat on their porch watching the sunset together. It was their ritual, unchanged after almost 4 decades of marriage. Kieran described the colors to her, the way the orange and pink light painted the sky, the shadows lengthening across the land. "It is beautiful tonight," he said softly. "Every night is beautiful when I am with you," Adelaide replied. Kieran took her hand and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Adelaide felt at peace, content with the life they had built, grateful for every moment they had shared. "Adelaide," Kieran said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "do you remember what I said to you on our wedding night, about you saving my life?" "I remember," Adelaide said, "though I never understood what you meant." "I was so lonely before you came," Kieran explained. "I had the ranch, I had work, but I had no real purpose beyond simple survival. I was going through the motions of living without truly living. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, to create a legacy beyond myself. You gave my life meaning and purpose. You saved me from a half-life of loneliness and gave me a full life of love and family. That is what I meant." Adelaide felt tears slide down her cheeks. "You did the same for me. I was dying when you found me, not just physically but spiritually. I had given up on life, on hope, on everything. You gave it all back to me. We saved each other, Kieran." "We did," Kieran agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Adelaide said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose this life, choose you over and over again." They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, holding hands and holding onto each other, grateful for the life they had built and the love they had shared. It was a love born of desperation and chance, nurtured through patience and commitment, grown into something strong and enduring enough to last a lifetime. Kieran lived to the age of 79, passing peacefully in his sleep, one winter night with Adelaide by his side. His death left a hole in Adelaide's heart that she knew would never fully heal, but she found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy of love they had built together. Adelaide lived another 8 years after Kieran's death, surrounded by family and honored in the community. She passed away at 85, in the same house where she and Kieran had spent their final years together. Her children were with her at the end, holding her hands and telling her how much she was loved. Her last words were a whisper, "Tell Kieran I am coming home." They buried her next to Kieran in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together decades earlier. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single line. Two souls who found each other against all odds and built a love that lasted forever. Kenneth stood at his parents' graves with his own children and grandchildren around him, telling the story he had told countless times before. The story of how his father had seen a blind woman begging on a boardwalk in Deeming and given her a wedding ring instead of food. How two strangers had taken a leap of faith and built a marriage, a family, a legacy that would endure for generations. "They loved each other from the beginning," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "even when they did not know it yet. They were meant to find each other, meant to build this family, meant to show all of us what real love looks like." The grandchildren and great-grandchildren listened, some hearing the story for the first time, others for the 100th. But it never got old, this tale of love and hope and second chances. It was their family history, their foundation, the proof that even in the darkest moments, love could find a way. As the family dispersed, heading back to the main house where they would share a meal and remember the two people who had started it all, one of the great-grandchildren, a girl of about 8, tugged on her mother's hand. "You think they are together now?" she asked. Grandma Adelaide and Grandpa Kieran, her mother smiled and squeezed her hand. "I am certain of it. Some loves are too strong to be separated by something as simple as death. They are together, sweetheart. They will always be together." And perhaps, in some way beyond mortal understanding, they were. Two souls who had found each other in the harsh landscape of the New Mexico Territory in 1887, who had built a life and a love that transcended their humble beginnings, who had proved that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. The ranch that Kieran built and Adelaide helped sustain continued to thrive for generations, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on their legacy, not just in the land and the cattle, but in the values they embodied: kindness, perseverance, the courage to take chances, and above all, the transformative power of love. In Deeming, the story of the cowboy and the blind woman became local legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But for those who knew the truth, who had seen Adelaide and Kieran together, who had witnessed their love firsthand, it was no myth. It was real as the desert sun and the prairie wind, as solid as the house they built and the family they raised. And somewhere, perhaps, in a place beyond time and mortal understanding, a cowboy and a blind woman walk hand in hand through fields of eternal summer, seeing each other not with physical eyes, but with the perfect vision of love that transcends all barriers. They are together as they always were meant to be, as they always will be, two souls joined by a choice made one desperate day on a dusty boardwalk, bound by a simple gold ring and a love that proved stronger than any obstacle. Their story ended, but their love never did. It lived on in every generation, in every grandchild who heard the tale and learned that love is not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing to see the best in another person, about taking chances, about building something beautiful from the most unlikely beginnings. Adelaide and Kieran Garrett's love story was complete, a closed circle of beginning and ending, of life fully lived and love fully expressed. From that first desperate moment on the streets of Deeming to their peaceful deaths, surrounded by the family they created, they had built something that would endure far beyond their mortal lives. And that, perhaps, is the true measure of a love story, not in its drama or its obstacles overcome, but in the legacy it leaves behind, the lives it touches, the proof it provides that love, real love, can transform everything,